What was Fortnite's prime? It's always been a fierce debate, but today I know how to settle it because I asked you guys questions about each season in the biggest poll in Fortnite history. And here's what's crazy. The Fortnite community has a clear answer, but it's definitely not what I thought. So to figure out what its prime really was, we have to go back through Fortnite history and start in season 1. Fortnite was basically an experiment thrown together in just a couple of weeks by Epic. They launched it in September 2017, and millions of players would experience greatness.
Hit it for 150!
It was a lot of fun, but this wasn't even really a season. Instead, there was a season pass with the first skins in Fortnite. There were a ton of bugs and glitches, and the guns just did way too much damage. But Epic were quickly fixing things, and players remember it fondly. They were communicating every single week and making balance changes and fixes, and the community really appreciated that. And so overall, people really can't dislike this season. It's the beginning of it all, and we see that in the data. I asked people to rate this season out of 10, and it looks like the average score was around an 8.5 out of 10, and quite frankly, I agree with that rating. This season was really short, and we quickly went into winter of 2017 with season 2. This was our first real season. It had a medieval themed battle pass with the Black Knight and of course, new POIs. I bet a lot of people don't even know what the OG map looked like before Tilted Towers, because this is when Fortnite really started getting popular and there were really no complaints. We also got mini shields, boogie bombs, and the 50 versus 50 game mode, which took everyone by surprise. Every little thing they added to the game felt extremely crazy. Something as simple as the silence pistol or even the impulse nades had people going crazy with different clips. Squads were having fun with the new minigun, and when the Valentine's Day update dropped, we all pretended like the Cupid's crossbow was actually useful, even though it was probably one of the worst items they ever added. Getting a win back then felt so amazing, you had to share it to your Snapchat or Instagram, and all your friends were asking you to hop on so you could squad up. So it was no surprise to me when I asked you guys to rate this season out of 10, it got a 9 out of 10. There wasn't much debate. It's actually really cool to see your answers match the season so well, but if a lot of seasons receive a 9 or 10 rating, how will we figure out which one is the best? Well, using all of your answers together, there's a pretty cool final conclusion that I'll go over once I've gone over all the seasons. But get ready, because we're about to enter Fortnite's first prime, season 3. Now we have our first full battle pass. The last one wasn't even 100 tiers. This one is a space theme with astronaut skins and some iconic ones like Rust Lord and the Reaper, aka John Wick. Every game these days have battle passes, but Fortnite was the first ever to do a battle pass on the big stage. Season 3 was amazing. Fortnite went from a huge game to a gigantic game. Ninja became the #1 streamer and was pulling insane viewers, and everyone else who was pretty much playing Fortnite started to blow up. They released more legendary items, the Deagle, the hunting rifle, C4s got added, and of course, the iconic Fortnite llama. This was also when double pumping became massively popular, and some people loved it while some obviously hated it. At this point in time, everyone knew Fortnite was a special game. So special that I was waking up at 6 in the morning to play this game until the sun went down. That's how serious the grind was. And we all had the opportunity to play this game. And it wasn't just an opportunity. It was the most fun all of us have had playing an online game since ever. This was considered the start of Fortnite's first prime. And most of you guys voted this season to receive a 10. And up next, we have personally my favorite season. This is when Fortnite stood out and showed the world that it was ready to be different than all the other games out there. Donald Mustard was working on a story, so when we saw the comet appear in the sky, people started going crazy. It was teasing the start of the Fortnite storyline and the build up to the first event in Fortnite. This was Fortnite Season 4. This is my favorite season because this season is the start of what made Fortnite the game it is today. We got an incredibly cool superhero themed battle pass, which eventually manifested into the Chapter 2 Marvel season. And we got skins that had edit styles, and everyone was going crazy over the Omega and Carbide skins. And if you missed out on those skins, to this day, you're still regretting it. I remember dropping in for the first time and going to Dusty and just checking out the crash site the Comet left behind and being amazed at how much the map has changed from just the day before. And at Dusty, we had the new Hop Rocks, which were awesome for movement. And speaking of movement, we also got the Jetpack, which made for some legendary clips. And then, of course, our first vehicle, the shopping cart. It wasn't just a bunch of gameplay content. We also got the start of the storyline. Doing weekly quests so you can uncover the secrets of the island and figure out what force was building a rocket on the map. Players were engaged week to week with different Easter eggs, loading screens, and a bunch of crazy quests, including, yes, search 7 chests in Risky Reels, which is now considered one of the hardest quests to ever exist in a video game. And then one random morning, we woke up to find the Thanos LTM, their first collab ever with Marvel of all people. And you can transform to Thanos and destroy all the players on the map. When I woke up that morning and I played the Thanos LTM, I knew that I was going to be playing this game for at least the next 10 years because no other game up until that moment has shown me that they're capable of moving that fast and adding content that quickly. It was just unheard of. And then all of this built up to the legendary rocket launch live event, the first grand live event in gaming history that had millions of people hop on to just watch the rocket launch. And guys, this happened all the way back in 2018, and to this day in 2024, no other game has had a live event that comes even close to the live events of Fortnite. And with this being my favorite season of all time, it's not a surprise that you guys gave this season a strong 10 out of 10, much stronger than season 3's 10. And now we move on to another great season in Fortnite's prime, Fortnite Season 5. Fortnite Season 5 was another pretty iconic battle pass. We had the drift skin. We also got an entire biome with Paradise. We got Lazy Links and the ATKs as our first real vehicle. And when streamers hopped on to get their first win, we had the slow-mo victory royales, which are now a staple in Fortnite. This season, though, showed us a couple of very overpowered weapons. There was a lot of spraying. The drum gun was really strong. The blue silence SMG was better than a SCAR. And the P90 before they nerfed it, and they took their time, was the strongest spray weapon in Fortnite history. And there was a ton of more items. And Fortnite also dropped their first ever competitive events in the Summer Skirmish and the Pro-Am. It was awesome to see the community come together around competitive Fortnite. And of course, the Reddit and social media went crazy for Kevin the Cube. It's clear that Season 5 is still in Fortnite's first prime, even though there were a couple of OP weapons. And it makes sense that you guys still rated this season overall a 10, but it's not as clear cut as Season 4. But unfortunately, Fortnite's spotless record would change in Season 6. The fall of 2018 came with a spooky themed season. We got the floating island and a bunch of zombies around the map. They were mostly received well, even though they were a bit too strong in endgames, and there were some amazing items. One of my favorite vehicles, the Quad Crasher. I mean, I really wish this would return the way it used to be, where you could fly around the map. Fortnite was still killing it. We got the sick butterfly event that hinted that there might be a bit more to the story of Fortnite, and people were making theories about the bunker and what's underneath. And again, this was a fun and new season, but looking back, there wasn't as many legendary moments as the last few, which is why I'm with you guys when you guys rated this one an 8 out of 10. The controversy really started to pick up in the next season, which was Fortnite Season 7. Now, this season is extremely memorable for many people. The nostalgic music, the cozy, chill vibes. There is a lot to like about this season. The first thing I remember were all the creators being taken to Epic HQ to try something new, Fortnite Creative. And obviously we know how big of a deal that has become for Fortnite these days, but there was also a ton of new content with this season. There were planes, a whole new biome, and a great battle pass. There were drift boards, a fan favorite when it comes to vehicles. The new infantry rifle came out, which became my favorite AR of all time. This was an excellent season, but there was also a ton of controversy. Fortnite released the Mythic Sword right before a huge tournament, and this caused a lot of backlash. We also got the introduction of the boombox, another failed attempt at Epic trying to nerf building, and this was really the beginning of the divide between casual and competitive players. And while people do look back at this season very fondly, if you actually played it, you do know there were a ton of people complaining about the planes and the mythic swords, and that Fortnite was in trouble. That, and there was a very forgettable live event. But overall, I still think the season was really fun. The gameplay was fantastic and there was a bunch of new additions, and I'm happy to see the perception of the season has healed over time, because you guys gave this one a 10. Even though there's more people giving it a 7 to 9 than the other seasons, it still has a pretty crazy score. Could this be the start of a new prime for Fortnite? Well, let's figure out what's going on in season 8. This one also has a lot to like. There was a brand new biome with a huge volcano on the map, and it was the start of the World Cup era. Arena came out, we had pirate cannons, the flint knock. We also had the second Avengers collab, which was really well received. And the one controversial item we had were the ballers. But to be honest, other than competitive mode, they were pretty fun and they did end up getting nerfed. Another big thing was Siphon was in the game, which made things very fast-paced and the action was non-stop until they removed Siphon. Most of you gave this one an 8, but there were also a ton of people who gave it a 9 and 10 as well. And at the end of the season, we got the Unvaulting live event, which led us into season 9. It was a futuristic theme with new POIs like Mega Mall and Neo Tilted. And even though they were cool, if you remember actually playing in the season, those new POIs were not great for building. What people noticed right when the season started, though, is that the pump was vaulted. At the time, this was unthinkable. This was the first time we had ever lost the pump, and it got replaced with the combat shotgun. And in the beginning, the combat was very inconsistent, so Epic had to make some changes and fix it up, but by the end of it, it was actually extremely strong and probably one of the strongest shotguns of all time. I do think this season might be a little bit underrated. We got new items every single week during the summer, the proximity launcher, storm flips, chug splashes. The wind tunnels were great for movement, and you could search the map for fort bites if you wanted to do that. However, this was the start of when YouTubers started making "Is Fortnite dying?" videos. And this would continue for the next 5 years, and it still hasn't stopped, even though Fortnite is continuing to break records and have millions of average players. And this season ended with one of the most memorable live events in Fortnite history, Monster vs. Mech. Anybody who didn't like the season at least liked the live event. You guys ended up rating this one mainly a 7 or 8. So this definitely can't be considered a prime season. But also looking back, there wasn't much to hate about it. This was also the season when the World Cup happened, and mid-World Cup we got our first teaser, a picture of Dusty Depot. So we knew Fortnite was pulling out all stops for the next season, Season X. Now, Season X, and you guys know the stats for this one will be interesting. Obviously, this is one of the most controversial seasons ever with the mechs. To this day, mechs might be one of the biggest mistakes Fortnite ever pulled and caused so much hate. The pros, the content creator, the orgs, even the casuals, everyone hopped in on hating the mechs and trying to get them removed. Epic at first was ignoring it, but then they had to address it, saying that their stats showed that players actually didn't mind using the mechs. So instead of nerfing them or removing them, they started pushing out content. There was Taco Time at Greasy, Zombies in Retail Row, Borderlands was on the map, and every week there was massive updates. And at the very least, you can say this season was not stale. Tilted Towers ended up changing like 3 different times in this one season. One thing I think people forget to mention is that the Battle Pass was very weak. There are straight up 0 memorable skins from this Battle Pass, and they were all just remixes of previous Battle Pass skins. And some people do forget that Epic eventually addressed the mechs by making them spawn in later in the game, and they were a lot weaker with less HP, but the damage was already done. There was a few things to like this season, but there was a lot to dislike. And overall, this is by far the most split pull. averaging out at around 6, with a lot of people giving it a 1 out of 10. But also there were a ton of 8s, 9s, and 10s. Probably one of the most difficult seasons to assess. So I definitely don't think this is a prime season, but after all this craziness, it was time for a reset with the black hole taking us into Chapter 2, Season 1. We got a whole new map, fishing, carrying knock players, and a ton of weapon changes and quality of life features. It was a fresh start, and Epic said they wanted to reset Fortnite and slow the pace down. Now, with all the craziness we just experienced in Season X, this was definitely a step back in time to the early days of Fortnite, especially when it came to gunplay. We had our basic weapons, our AR, shotgun, SMG, gray to legendary rarity, no crazy weapons, no crazy items, no movement either. And very quickly, that kind of became a problem because one of the biggest things about this season is the only update that actually happened was the addition of the harpoon gun. Now, I've definitely clowned on them a lot for not adding more to this season, but actually looking back, there were some other updates, but they weren't that memorable, even though at the time they were kind of fun. We had the Fort Nightmares event with the Storm King boss, and they should definitely do that again. We also had the Star Wars event, which was more of a commercial for Star Wars, and if you weren't a fan of Star Wars, it didn't really hit. Honestly, there was more hype for the Kraken events, if you guys actually remember that, than there was for the Star Wars event. But guys, I almost forgot something huge. This was the season when we first got the Winterfest cabin. This was a massive win for the community, Fortnite giving us some free cosmetics for Winterfest, and a lot of people really appreciated that. The season had some content, but the issue was that Fortnite announced that next season was getting delayed, and this became the longest season of all time. And there was really nothing to do. You guys ended up rating this one a 7, which in my opinion is very generous. I actually hate this season more than Season X, but that's because I'm a content creator and there was not enough content. A lot of my friends ended up quitting the game during this season and moving on to other games due to lack of content. So for me, I definitely have a much lower rating. But now we move on to Chapter 2, Season 2. Many people consider this Fortnite's second prime. Probably one of the best battle passes we've ever gotten. The agency, the shark, the yacht, great, fantastic additions to the map. People didn't know that they even wanted bosses and NPCs and mythic weapons, but this season introduced all of that. I think the reason the battle pass is so iconic is because these skins were the first bosses we got in Fortnite. This season was also packed with love and care. We had the Deadpool hidden area in the lobby. We had story Easter eggs all around the map and the entire Ghost versus Shadow minigame LTM as well. Fortnite put so much effort into this season across the board. The gunplay was also very fun, especially if you were on controller, and this was the season when I did my controller series. Not to mention, we got a banger final event. Midas wanted to take control of the storm, but caused so much energy that it sent us into that office where we met Agent Jones. This was a groundbreaking moment for us. We finally got a really good look into the Fortnite story, and a lot of casual people started getting interested in the story after this event. There was a ton to like, but just like the previous season, this season also had major delays, and it was massively extended. In the later half of this season, there wasn't really much going on. But for most people, that didn't matter. This season was just so much fun. They didn't mind playing more games with their friends. I mean, this was peak lockdown where everyone was on grinding Fortnite 24/7. And I almost forgot, we got one of the best live events and the best concert of all time, the Travis Scott events. This season received the strongest 10 out of 10 so far, but there's heavy competition coming in soon. Let's see how it holds up. Because water is about to flood the map in Fortnite Season 3. And every single week, the water would lower, giving us more of the map to play with. We got rideable sharks, some sick new POIs with more mythic bosses and items, and again, Epic tried vaulting the pump shotgun. They replaced it with the charge shotgun, and while some people thought it was pretty clunky, I think it was actually pretty fun to use, and it ended up becoming a very skilled weapon. This was also the season where they added cars. That was a massive update day. I know now that cars have a lot of hatred because of this most recent season, but when they came out, they didn't have turrets and guns on them. They were just a great way to move around the map, and it really changed up the pacing of Fortnite. And with Unreal Engine getting better and better, Fortnite would start experimenting with new features in Fortnite that they added in Unreal Engine. For example, we got fire this season with the flare gun, which added a whole new dynamic to the game. One thing though a lot of people forget about this season and even the previous season is that there were a ton of bots in the matches. It was actually really hard to find just 10 real players in your game. And while it was fun to fly around the map with the shockwave launcher, you never really got to fight a lot of real players. And people did start complaining about this, including myself. That doesn't change the fact though that this season was packed with content and it was actually very short, only 70 days long. It was so short that you probably forgot Marauders were a thing this season, and people did not like Marauders, but they didn't stick around long enough for people to hate them that much. I think honestly this season kind of gets forgotten in history because it's surrounded by two banger seasons, but in my eyes it was not a bad season at all, and you guys rated it an 8 or 9, which still extends Fortnite's second prime into the next season. Fortnite Season 4, the Marvel season. I knew this one was going to be popular, but I just didn't know how popular. This season probably had the most content out of any season. First of all, another very iconic battle pass. I mean, literally iconic characters in the battle pass. You can't top it. We got an insane amount of Marvel mythics that were very well executed. There were new ones every single week, and some were insane and others weren't, but they were all extremely fun to use. Then Fortnite drops the biggest mid-season update, Tony Stark's Industries. It was a brand new biome on the map. There were also ships that landed that you could get loot from, and pumps were also back and you could get them easily from the Stark chest. So people were playing Arena non-stop, dropping at Stark's Industries. And another part of the season that some people forget because it was just so stacked was Fort Nightmares came out and lets you respawn as a ghost on the map. This was all happening in Season 4. Then we got another all-time event, the Galactus event. In my opinion, though, the lead-up was maybe a little bit cooler than the actual event, but it was still Fortnite's peak player count ever with 16 million concurrent players. There wasn't much to dislike about this season, and you guys gave it a strong 10 as well, and I couldn't agree more. These last 3 seasons were definitely Fortnite's second prime. Unfortunately, though, it comes to an end with the next season, Fortnite Chapter 2, Season 5. Now listen, this wasn't a bad season at all. We had a whole new sand biome. We got the introduction of exotic weapons and the gold system, which has stuck around to this day, and a ton of new excellent weapons. However, this season they did end up vaulting the pump shotgun again for the lever shotgun. And the only person who I know that likes the lever shotgun is Nick 830. So if you weren't him, most people thought it was just too inaccurate and weak. The 0 point would bring in new collabs and exotics to the game every single week, so there was still a ton of content. It's just that without the pump, the gunplay felt a little bit slower and kind of clunky. Okay, so here's where you're going to see a trend. Seasons where Fortnite removed the pump consistently get rated lower. We also did end up getting another Winterfest, but I think the key thing that holds this season back was that the main feature, which was sand tunneling, had a bug where it made you invincible, so Fortnite had to remove it for pretty much the entire season. And here's another interesting thing. They also added the 0 point crystals, which were a great and very cool idea, but they were forgotten because you rarely got to use them. But it's literally the exact same thing as the skulls from Chapter 5 Season 2. So imagine how different this season would have played out if Epic just made them a lot easier to use. So with key features being disabled and no pumps, people don't remember this season that fondly. And you guys rated this one a 7, which is fair. But considering that you guys were handing out so many 10s, I think this might be slightly low. But now, you guys have been waiting for this one. Fortnite's anti-prime, Fortnite Season 6. You guys did not hold back. This started off with a pre-season story event, which I thought was okay, but didn't really hit the mark as far as live events go. We had a brand new biome, which was interesting and new, but that's really all it had going for it because building in those biomes was ridiculous. We had a ton of new content like bows, primal weapons, and crafting. It was definitely an interesting premise and there was a lot of interesting items, but for some reason, the combination of everything just was not fun. The primal shotgun was obviously OP and just broken. Competitive was fun, but the gunplay and the meta, the map, it just didn't work well. And let's not forget the very forgettable mythic boots that they added, which were very hard to obtain and were completely useless. This definitely gets memed as one of the worst seasons ever, and I think you guys might have been a little bit harsh on this one with all the 1 out of 10 votes, and people ended up rating this one around a 4 out of 10, and for that, I definitely agree. But thankfully, Fortnite ends up redeeming themselves with Season 7. This one I think is quite strong. They got rid of all the primal stuff and the primal POI, and this season had some of the most creative content I've ever seen. We had the Propifier, the Gravitron, the UFOs, the plasma cannon, the alien nanite cubes. It was like they told everyone at Epic, guys, this was our last chance to do an alien themed season, just go crazy. And they did. They dropped the mothership minigame, which completely changes the pace of the battle royale, and people loved it. We also, of course, had the signature weapon of the season, the railgun, which was a very fun weapon. It was a little bit OP, but very memorable. This season had a ton of content and ended with a pretty fire end of season event. Unfortunately, though, we got clickbaited and the map wouldn't be completely destroyed the next season, which kind of makes us remember it a little bit differently. If this dropped during lockdown, I think people would regard this as a prime season. But since it dropped kind of in a slower paced era right after Primal, when a lot of people stopped playing, it doesn't get remembered as well. And you guys ended up rating it a 7 or 8, which I think kind of makes it underrated. I think this season is a little bit better than that. Now, if the last season was overlooked, I think this one should have maybe received even more hate. Fortnite Season 8 Cubed started off very disappointing, because when we logged in, we saw that the map had not changed at all from a very dramatic live event that just happened. There were the new sideways weapons that you could upgrade, and there were some cool new items like the armored walls, which was pretty unique, and the sideways scythe. The caretaker was a cool boss to find in the sideways, but eventually people started ignoring the sideways, and a lot of the sideways weapons were not even really used. We also had the return of Kevin. Actually, there were a lot of them rolling around the map, spreading this orange color to anything they touched. But to be honest, it was kind of an eyesore. And in my opinion, the map just did not look good. It was just a mess, especially towards the end. The cube pyramid in the center was cool, but didn't actually feel super fun to hot drop at because you couldn't farm anything and there wasn't a lot of loot there. It did have the Naruto collab, which was one of my favorite animes. But now that we've had a few anime collabs, you kind of look back and you realize that they did Naruto dirty because he did not get a decent mythic weapon. You guys ended up giving this season a 6 or 7, but to be honest, I think that's a little bit generous. I think this season could have easily been the meme bad season, but I guess not a lot of players were actually playing. This season ended with a live event, which could have been one of the coolest live events ever if it wasn't spoiled a day early by Fortnite themselves. Seeing the map literally flip in front of our eyes was absolutely crazy, and it led us into Chapter 3. This, surprisingly, was Fortnite's third prime. It was a fantastic season with a brand new map themed around the 7, and it had so many things going for it to succeed. The stale Chapter 2 loot pool was refreshed with all new weapons, and there were so many great quality of life changes. The med mist, guzzle juice, and shield canisters were a nice addition. We also got sliding, which was a great movement mechanic, and of course, the main item we were all hyped for, the Spider-Man mythics. And when they came out, they were exactly what we dreamed of. It worked so well. People were saying that it worked even better than actual Spider-Man and Marvel games. We also got the introduction of victory crowns and tents. And we had Sergeant Winter rolling around the map because it was covered in ice. But as the ice melted, we started getting excited because we noticed one area looked suspiciously like tilted towers. And on one random update, we got it back in its full glory. And a few weeks later, another amazing feature was unveiled by the Snow, Klombo, and the community went crazy for him. The meta and gunplay was fun, even though I remember shotguns being slightly weak. Viewership and interest in Fortnite was at an all-time high again, and so many players had fond memories of them playing this during Fortnite Winterfest of 2021. You guys rated this season a 10, and this season is known as the third prime of Fortnite, so I definitely agree with that rating. And next up, we have Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 2, and Epic took a huge risk. They announced the beginning of the season would remove building. This was insane, but thankfully they added overshield, sprinting, and mantling into the game. It was very smartly done, and a lot of OG players who got tired of the sweaty build meta returned during this season. I also think that the blimps and cannons on them were a super fun way to move around the map. I had a ton of great fights in the blimps, and even though the season was a war-themed season, due to real-life circumstances, Fortnite was maybe a little bit hesitant to lean too much into the war stuff. We got tanks, the armored battle bus, but something tells me there was more planned that ended up getting scrapped. The initial zero build hype was awesome, but at the tail end of it, it kind of started to dry out. Thankfully, Epic ended it off with a great live event. The mech returned to save the island, and we got some cool story progression, which led absolutely nowhere. Like, it didn't lead to anything. We have no idea what happened to Jonesy or the Foundation, but overall, you guys rated this one a 7 out of 10. I would definitely say the first half of this season was definitely included in Fortnite's third prime, but as you guys can see, next season is definitely not extending it. Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3. It was called Vibin', which had a really stylish and cool battle pass, and I liked the mindset behind the season, but for some reason, for me and a lot of players, it just didn't hit. The reality tree was a solid POI, but the rest of the new biomes wasn't anything too exciting. The guns added are notorious for being some of the worst ever. The two-shot shotgun and the charge SMG, which easily is the worst weapon ever. This season was entirely saved by some very cool collabs. We had Darth Vader in the Battle Pass, Indiana Jones, and a really sick Dragon Ball Z update with an awesome, very memorable mythic. But honestly, looking at everything else in this season, it was rough. This one, in my opinion, is just as bad as Primal, and if it wasn't for Dragon Ball Z, it would be rated even lower. You guys gave this one a 6 or 7, which in my opinion is kind of generous. Ending off Chapter 3, we had the Chrome Season 4. This one was very hyped for me personally because I had been excitingly waiting for my icon skin. So that was a huge highlight for me. But the actual season itself wasn't my favorite. With the addition of Chrome, I liked the whole creative aspect of phasing through walls, and I think the evil Chrome weapons upgrading by doing damage was unique, but the weapons themselves were kind of mid. And looking back, most people didn't really use the Chrome that much, and the evil Chrome weapons were used even less. They also added slide kicking this season, and the battle pass was a little bit weak. Thankfully, my skin kind of saved the day. There wasn't a lot of memorable updates, and we had a very mid Fortnitemares event. But they had somewhat of a chance to redeem themselves with the end of chapter finale, because people were very hyped to find out that we were actually going to end this chapter in just 4 seasons. But the live event to end this chapter was easily the worst live event Fortnite had ever done. They hyped up the Herald as this big villain, but she ended up dying in a very quick and short cutscene, and then we ended up just doing creative quests on a weird, like, floating, objects. It felt very rushed. It was not interesting. People were scratching their head, and for the first time, I actually agreed with everyone saying that the event was terrible, and it was terrible. You guys ended up rating this one a 6, and in my opinion, that's a little bit generous. Even though my skin came out, I still think it's very generous. Fortnite was not in its prime, but thankfully, it would start to get some momentum back in Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 1. We got a whole new set of weapons and some new iconic ones. The Slap Juice, the Shockwave Hammer, the Excalibur, and it all came together with augments. And when they came out, they were super fun because getting specific ones actually allowed for some very interesting and unique gameplay styles. Some were very strong, and it felt like you were picking things that were actually useful. This season did have a ton of bugs though. There was a lot of ways to get cheesy wins, a lot of bugs that were getting abused, and some weren't getting patched because Epic was on their winter vacation. I do remember the gunplay being fun, and the main thing was how strong the red eye assault rifle was. I mean, this was back when we had hit scan, and this thing was doing 40 plus damage per bullet, and it was very, very accurate and insanely good. We also got a sick new update midway through the Heisted event, which brought in tons of exotics and was an excellent refresh for the season. I think the season was a pretty solid season 1, and you guys ended up rating it a 7 or 8. So maybe not a prime, but it was definitely a good start to the chapter. And thankfully, we had a new season to get excited for. Season 2 Mega. This season started off hot. We got a huge POI, Mega City, the biggest POI we have ever seen. We had the addition of the grind rails. Fighting in this POI felt like an actual movie. A bunch of new themed POIs around the map, combat caches, and the floating island returning as a mid-game objective. A throwback to the floating island from chapter 1. We also got some iconic items, the Havoc shotgun, the kinetic blade, which was a simple yet amazing movement item. However, the augments were not the best, and picking augments became more of a chore this season than it did last season. And the other thing were the slurps. These things were strong and they were everywhere. I loved them at first, but very quickly started hating them because anytime you cracked somebody or you had somebody weak, it would just pop a slurp and you would feel like you were fighting Thanos. However, we did get a sick collab with Attack on Titan and a very, very good addition of the ODM gear. This was one of the best movement items and one of the best collab items they had ever added. And even though they had done Star Wars collabs in the past, the Star Wars collab this season was probably my favorite with the addition of the Force powers. This was also the season Ranked came out, which was a huge W. While it hasn't been perfect, it was definitely a huge upgrade to Arena, which was just mindless W King. Oh, and another small thing. UEFN got announced, and it brought a lot of hype to the future of Fortnite, which we are now seeing play out. The season had a sick theme and it was packed with content, but not a lot of it was necessarily themed around the season. The lock-on pistol was the only futuristic item they really added. The augments and the gunplay were fun, but not super balanced, and I feel like this season had a lot of the ingredients to be a prime Fortnite season, but I remember the player base and the interest around the game just not being there. You guys ended up rating this one an 8, which I think is fair. I do see a lot of people have fond memories of this season. So far, chapter 4 is off to a promising start, but let's see how things go in season 3 Wilds. This one is an interesting one. The jungle was a very unique idea, and it actually did feel fun to run around and slide through the mud. It was an interesting area to play in, especially discovering the jungle vaults and the little like puzzles you had to unlock. That was actually very cool, but most of the items fell flat. We went from the shockwave hammer and kinetic blade to the kinetic boomerang, which was unfortunately completely useless. The loot pool was also awful. We had the drum shotgun, the flapjack rifle, which was very strong, and a bunch of useless items like the wasp jars and the thermal DMR and the cloak gauntlets. Then they brought the MK Alpha, which was the MK7, but worse. And then the sharp tooth shotgun, which is still one of the weirdest items ever. They just reskinned the pump and called it the sharp tooth, but gave it completely different stats and gameplay mechanics. But thankfully, the mammoth pistol was actually a banger. It was a very sick item and felt very satisfying to use. The augments were now even more useless than last season. The season's gunplay was just not fun. And while the jungle biome was a cool idea, it sucked that it was sunken into the ground and it wasn't the greatest place to build around. And it didn't help when Fortnite added the worst event ever, the summer event of 2023, where they just threw a mural on the wall and unvaulted a couple of items. You guys rated the season a 5 out of 10, but there was a ton of you who gave it a 1 out of 10. Honestly, I agree. This one's up there with being one of the worst seasons of all time. And here's where I start to notice a pattern. Think back to all the seasons so far that were rated poorly. Season X, Primal season, then the Cube season, the Chrome season, Wilds, and even the current season, Wrecked. I noticed something. Almost all of them feel messy. I'm not talking about the soccer player. I'm talking about the actual look and aesthetic of the season. They are all visually unappealing or harsh. In season 6, you're in a primitive orange forest with clunky guns and POIs, or the cube corruption is spreading everywhere, making things look dark and gross. or the chrome sucking the color out of the season, or the jungle that is full of mud and making you play with old-timey weapons. And now we have the harsh sand, making the map feel inhospitable. But some of the most fun seasons that were rated the highest, like Chapter 2 Season 2, have a clean aesthetic, bright colors. The map looks fun and welcoming, and the guns feel responsive. I do think that the visual aesthetic and theme that they pick for a season plays a huge critical role in how the players receive it, and the dirty, messier, darker themes rarely work out well for them. But anyways, enough yapping, because now we need to go into Season 4. It's time for a clean aesthetic. Last Resort. This one was a banger, and I know bangers. I would consider this the start of the fourth prime of Fortnite, and it would run for the next 2 seasons. 3 new vault POIs around the map with bosses, mythics, and key cards. I mean, come on. This is definitely a throwback to Chapter 2 Season 2. We also got some sick new items like the Rocket Ram, the Crash Pad Jr., and the briefcase, which were kind of useless, but also fun for memes. But in the vaults, you got to pick some of the unvaulted mythics, which we haven't seen in a long time. This was a really great idea. We had a ton of fun this season. A lot of friends hopped on to play. The gunplay was fun, even though the twin bag was very OP. I personally enjoyed it. The augments, though, were still very mid, sadly. But at this point, people stopped even using them. We got introduced to a cool villain, Kato Thorn, and he brought a vampire-themed Fort Nightmares with the wood stake shotgun, and he was a pretty sick boss to fight. And overall, this battle pass was pretty good. The season was short, sweet, and I remember the player base absolutely loving it. You guys rated this one only an 8, but I think we'll look back at this one fondly as time passes. Then we got an announcement. We thought, no way. They announced Kato's time machine would bring us back in time to the old Fortnite map for Fortnite OG. All those videos I made about the map returning finally come to life. The player base exploded. Every week, a new season worth of content would be unvaulted to keep things fresh. And the content this season was mostly just playing with your friends. This was a genius idea from Fortnite that they had in their back pocket the entire time. The only thing that would have made it even better is if they went back to the old sound effects and some of the old aesthetics and weapon models and made everything really look OG. But that's just more of a personal touch. And did we ever get an answer as to why the main Tilted Towers building was not there? Was that just a mistake? But either ways, you guys still gave this season a solid 10 with almost no one voting anything other than a 10. We got a pretty cool live event teasing all the new modes Fortnite dropped. And I do wish that the M&M live event was a little bit longer. And all this hype and momentum carried into Fortnite Chapter 5. We had a secret society theme with Peter Griffin finally coming to the game. We got more bosses, vaults, and instead of key cards, we got medallions, which instantly became an iconic feature. And Fortnite did away with the augments. Brand new map, and to be honest, I love this map compared to Chapter 4. The train is cool. We got a ton of new weapons, weapon attachments, which was something we have been waiting on for a while, and they pulled it off in a smart way. But unfortunately, the main thing people were talking about was the movement change. Fortnite ended up tweaking the movement bit by bit, but looking back, I think it's safe to say the pros were overreacting just a little bit. But the content never stopped. We got Fortnite Lego, Fortnite Festival, and Rocket Racing all back to back. These modes were pretty well done. I just wish Lego came out in a bit more of a finished state with a little bit more content. But for the week I played Lego, I was hooked and it was a ton of fun. The gunplay was also a lot of fun. Other than the Frenzy auto shotgun, there were so many players playing, and I think this is clearly still in Fortnite's fourth prime. And we were very excited for the next season because it was Greek mythology, something that we had been waiting on for a long time, and it was teased with a series of insane mini live events. They were putting a ton of effort into this, so we knew it was going to be crazy. Let's see if Fortnite can continue its fourth prime in Chapter 5 Season 2. This started off with a massive delay due to some sort of bug, but when we hopped on, we were hyped. There were 2 huge new biomes, the Underworld and Mount Olympus, and they were so very well done. The Zeus Mythic and the Wings of Icarus felt insane to use for the first time. There were new medallions which were cool, and you could challenge the bosses for them with these sick boss fights. We were on track for a legendary season, but instead of carrying the interest that came from the last season, it kind of started to die down. I think the season had so much potential. The theme was sick, the teasers were great, but imagine if this season was like the Marvel season with an insane amount of mythic powers for all the different Greek gods. There could have been a ton of Greek god powers that they added every single week, but instead all we got were the chains of Hades, which were fun, but it was the only one. And it felt like the season ran out of content quickly. And looking back, the season wasn't as memorable as it should have been. This had the potential to be an all-time season, but you guys ended up rating it a 7 out of 10, which I also agree with. And now for the most controversial season since Season X. Season 3 wrecked. This also had a ton of sick teasers getting us excited for it. But on release, people started freaking out. We got a giant sand biome with car upgrades and the Nitro Fists. I personally think that the idea that they were going for was executed perfectly because every fight felt like a movie and upgrading your car was fun, and even using the Nitro Fist was extremely fun, but not everybody enjoyed it. Basically what it came down to is whether you enjoy driving around in the cars or not, and it really split the community in half. Thankfully though, this season's saving grace is Fortnite Reload, because if you don't want to play with the cars, Fortnite Reload removes all of that. It takes it back to its core Fortnite mechanics, a very clean Chapter 1 remix map with a very clean loot pool. Now, we still have over a month left of this season, and there are a ton of content updates planned, but Epic's gonna have to do a lot of dramatic stuff for people to remember this season in a good light. This season received a lot of 1 out of 10s, but the rest of you are giving it a 5, 6, or 7, which makes sense. So it's safe to say this season was not one of Fortnite's prime. And after all these seasons, Fortnite's prime seems kind of hard to figure out. There were a lot of seasons that you guys rated 10s, and there was a lot of streaks where Fortnite was doing an amazing job back to back to back. But to finally answer it, I had a couple other questions I asked you. Specifically, if you had to pick only one, what was your favorite season ever? And the answer was very surprising. One season had more votes than any other season by far. More votes than all of Fortnite Chapter 1 seasons combined, with 26.7% of all first place votes. Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 2. And coming in second with 16.5% of the votes, it's Chapter 2 Season 4. It's such a massive difference when you compare it to anything else. Chapter 3 Season 1 had a respectable 3rd place, but the results speak for themselves. I also asked you guys if you were a comp or casual player and what year you started playing Fortnite. And no matter what, even the OGs agreed that Chapter 2 Season 2 is the clear number 1. So especially with Season 4 being such a favorite and coming in second, it seems like Fortnite's prime was Chapter 2 Season 2, Season 3, and Season 4. And to be honest, that's an answer that I'm kind of happy with. I will always love Chapter 1, but you guys were loud and clear. And while initially I wasn't as excited about the return of Chapter 2 OG, making this video actually got me excited. And of course, I will be there, and I hope you will too. Thank you guys so much for watching.